From the opening days of the conflict, the Clone Wars functioned as a structural stress test that revealed internal contradictions embedded within the Jedi Order. Rather than exposing weaknesses through direct confrontation, the war illuminated systemic inconsistencies that the Order had managed to overlook during centuries of relative peace. The shift from a monastic institution into a military command structure forced the Jedi to assume roles outside their philosophical design. Once they accepted those roles, the conflict began highlighting gaps between their stated principles and their operational behavior. The Sith did not need to orchestrate this exposure, because the institutional strain generated by the war produced it on its own. The immediate acceptance of the clone army demonstrated the first major disconnect between doctrine and action. The Jedi emphasized autonomy, ethical restraint, and respect for sentient life, yet they assumed command of a force whose origin, consent, and rights were never formally investigated. The speed with which the Order accepted this arrangement suggested that wartime urgency outweighed ethical scrutiny. The lack of inquiry into the clones' creation reflected a trust in Republic systems rather than adherence to Jedi values. This decision established a precedent in which practical convenience superseded philosophical consistency. By stepping into military leadership without clarifying the conditions of their participation, the Jedi aligned themselves with practices that contradicted their own teachings. As the war progressed, the transition from peacekeeping to strategic command introduced responsibilities the Jedi were ill-prepared to handle. Their training emphasized negotiation and mediation, yet the conflict required long-term planning, risk assessment, and tactical directives affecting millions of soldiers. The Order attempted to reconcile these tasks with their principles, but operational demands often overrode doctrinal restraint. Assignments included sieges, surveillance, and targeted strikes that extended beyond traditional defensive engagement. The Jedi adapted to these roles out of necessity, yet the adaptation created tension between their identity as guardians and their function as military officers. This tension revealed that their institutional structure lacked mechanisms for integrating ethical guidance into large-scale warfare. The Jedi's increasing involvement in political decision-making further revealed the gap between their self-image and their actual influence. Although the Order insisted that it maintained neutrality, it served as a central instrument of Republic authority. Senate leaders consulted Jedi representatives for strategic input, relied on them for enforcement operations, and used their presence to legitimize governmental actions. By engaging in these processes, the Jedi inadvertently endorsed policies they had not initiated or controlled. Their participation blurred the distinction between advisory roles and direct political engagement. The war revealed that the Order lacked the structural independence required to maintain genuine neutrality while operating under governmental supervision. A significant aspect of the war's exposure came through the Jedi's interpretation of attachment and emotional regulation. Their doctrine advocated balanced detachment, yet the realities of sustained conflict produced environments in which bonds naturally formed. Jedi generals worked alongside clone units for years, developing working relationships shaped by shared responsibility and repeated risk. Although the Order attempted to frame these bonds through the lens of leadership, the practical impact contradicted doctrinal guidance. Jedi encouraged camaraderie to maintain morale, but discouraged emotional connection to maintain discipline. This contradictory approach created internal pressures that neither the Order nor individual Jedi had systems to reconcile. The war thereby revealed that the doctrine was not designed for environments demanding continuous interpersonal cooperation. The war also exposed the Order's limited understanding of trauma, both in themselves and in the soldiers who served alongside them. Long-term exposure to conflict produced psychological strain, yet the Jedi relied on meditative practices rather than structured support systems to process cumulative stress. While these techniques had value, they were tailored for controlled environments rather than for sustained high-intensity operations. The absence of formal support left many Jedi to manage the burdens of prolonged combat without guidance. Their internal struggles were seldom addressed publicly, revealing that the Order lacked procedures for evaluating the psychological effects of warfare. This gap contrasted sharply with their claims of being equipped to guide others through conflict. Another layer of exposure occurred through the Order's relationship with the Senate. The Jedi believed they were operating in service to the Republic, yet the political system was already experiencing degradation. Corruption, bureaucratic gridlock, and hidden agendas shaped many decisions affecting the war. By aligning themselves with a flawed system, the Jedi became associated with its shortcomings. The Clone Wars made this association visible to the galaxy. Citizens witnessing the conflict did not differentiate between the Republic's policies and the Jedi's participation in enforcing them. This dynamic revealed that the Order's role was more deeply intertwined with political outcomes than it acknowledged. The war laid bare the extent to which their influence depended on a system they did not control. The Jedi's interpretation of prophecy and strategic foresight further contributed to their exposure. The Order relied on tradition, councils, and consensus to guide decisions, yet the war demanded rapid adjustments that outpaced their deliberative processes. The perception that the Jedi were losing clarity in their assessments became evident as crises multiplied. Their predictions did not match unfolding events, and their uncertainty weakened confidence in their leadership. The war exposed that their connection to broader insight had weakened not because of external interference, but because institutional rigidity limited their ability to respond to evolving conditions. This limitation was visible to observers across the Republic, diminishing the Order's credibility. The increasing reliance on covert operations added another layer of contradiction. The Jedi had historically condemned espionage as incompatible with their guiding principles, yet wartime necessity led to intelligence missions that required deception, infiltration, and surveillance. These methods contrasted sharply with the Order's teachings on transparency and honesty. By authorizing such missions, the Order revealed that its ethical standards were more flexible than publicly acknowledged. This flexibility undermined the perception of moral consistency that had defined their authority. The war did not create this inconsistency, but it brought it into clear view. The Jedi also misread the evolving security environment. Surveillance programs expanded in response to separatist threats, and law enforcement agencies developed new authority under wartime statutes. Civilian freedoms contracted as the Republic restructured its internal protections. Instead of recognizing these developments as indicators of authoritarian drift, the Jedi accepted them as necessary components of wartime governance. Their compliance with these policies, even when they contradicted traditional concerns about governmental overreach, weakened their credibility as defenders of civic balance. The war revealed that the Order had difficulty distinguishing between legitimate security measures and systemic shifts that altered the foundations of the Republic. Another area where the war exposed internal contradictions involved the Jedi's interpretation of prophecy and intuition. For centuries, the Order relied on collective wisdom and meditative insight to navigate uncertainty. Yet wartime demands pressured them to accelerate decisions, often forcing action before consensus was reached. The resulting dissonance produced uneven guidance across the institution. Some Jedi attempted to interpret the shifting currents of the Force through traditional methods, while others dismissed prophecy as an unreliable resource during conflict. This divergence revealed that the Order lacked a unified method for integrating intuition with real-time intelligence. The war highlighted these inconsistencies as strategic disadvantages rather than philosophical debates. An additional structural issue revealed by the war was the Order's approach to mentorship. The Jedi maintained a hierarchical system designed for stability rather than adaptability, with established lines of training and evaluation. Wartime acceleration disrupted these processes. Young knights assumed command roles without the extended apprenticeships that traditionally shaped their ethical grounding. Masters found themselves responsible for battlefield decisions rather than philosophical development. This shift exposed the institution's dependence on long-term mentorship cycles that were incompatible with wartime realities. The resulting gaps in guidance left numerous knights navigating complex moral environments with limited support. The war demonstrated that the Order had no scalable system for preserving ethical instruction under crisis conditions. The experiences of clone soldiers further highlighted areas where Jedi doctrine conflicted with wartime practice. Although many Jedi developed strong working relationships with their units, the Order treated the army as a temporary necessity rather than a long-term responsibility. The lack of formal advocacy for the clones' rights or post-war future revealed a structural blind spot. The Jedi framed their leadership as compassionate, but they did not challenge the legal framework that categorized the troopers as property of the state. This contradiction was not a matter of individual negligence, but of institutional design. The war exposed that the Jedi lacked processes for evaluating ethical implications of systems that fell outside their historical mandate. The handling of internal dissent provided additional insight into the Order's vulnerabilities. Throughout the war, individual Jedi raised concerns regarding strategic direction, political involvement, and doctrinal flexibility. The Council responded with cautious deliberation, but seldom implemented revisions to address these concerns. This reluctance stemmed from a long-standing belief that stability required resistance to rapid change. However, wartime conditions demanded adaptable structures rather than rigid adherence to precedent. The war revealed that the Order equated consistency with reliability, even when consistency prevented necessary reform. This mindset limited the institution's ability to recalibrate in response to emerging threats. The Council's relationship with Anakin Skywalker offered a concentrated example of these systemic limitations. The Order interpreted Anakin's questions as indicators of instability rather than attempts to reconcile conflicting expectations. They viewed his concerns about leadership, autonomy, and institutional transparency through the lens of discipline rather than development. During wartime, Anakin's extraordinary abilities and unconventional decision-making style magnified the tension between personal initiative and institutional protocol. Instead of redesigning mentorship approaches to accommodate his unique background, the Order applied traditional standards that were not suited for his circumstances. The war revealed that the existing framework lacked capacity to support individuals whose experiences diverged from established norms. Another area of exposure centered on the Order's interpretation of its own authority. The Jedi viewed themselves as protectors rather than rulers, yet wartime command placed them in positions with direct influence over regional governance. Military decisions affected trade routes, sector security, and civilian infrastructure. The Order attempted to maintain philosophical separation from political leadership, yet functional separation was impossible under wartime conditions. The contradiction between their stated neutrality and their operational authority became increasingly visible. The war forced the galaxy to observe the Jedi acting as both protectors and enforcers, revealing that their institutional identity was more intertwined with state power than either the Jedi or the Republic publicly acknowledged. The Jedi's limited engagement with broader galactic communities further contributed to their exposure. Many worlds affected by the conflict experienced resource shortages, economic disruptions, and security challenges that did not directly involve battlefield operations. The Order offered assistance when possible, yet their strategic focus prioritized military directives over civilian needs. This prioritization reflected practical constraints rather than neglect, but it highlighted another institutional limitation. The war revealed that the Jedi lacked the organizational capacity to manage humanitarian responsibilities at the scale required. The visibility of these gaps weakened the perception of the Order as a universal stabilizing force. The final months of the conflict underscored the cumulative impact of these exposures. Institutional fatigue, political strain, and strategic uncertainty created conditions in which the Jedi were perceived less as independent guardians and more as extensions of an increasingly strained government. The Sith capitalized on this perception, but they did not create it. The war had already shifted public understanding of the Order's role. By the time the events of Order 66 unfolded, the galaxy viewed the Jedi not through the lens of ancient guardianship, but through the lens of wartime participation. The collapse of the Order was therefore not solely a matter of betrayal, but the outcome of an identity crisis that had gone unresolved throughout the conflict. The Clone Wars thus functioned as an analytical lens that revealed the structural, philosophical, and operational inconsistencies embedded within the Jedi Order. The war did not redefine the institution. It clarified what had already become true. The Jedi entered the conflict believing they could preserve their ideals within an environment that contradicted those ideals at every level. Their downfall emerged from the gap between who they claimed to be and what the war required them to become. The Sith delivered the final strike, but the Clone Wars delivered the evidence. What the Jedi tried not to see became unavoidable, and the consequences reshaped the galaxy long after the last battle ended.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.